that's for board members.
Yeah, that should work. And that's one I used. It popped right in.
That's for board members.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hello, it's Dan Saunders with the Growth Planning Committee. Welcome to the April 20th, 2021 meeting. And we'll proceed with the introductions of the members on board. So, Warner?
Warner Gilliam.
Paul?
Paul Hogan. Good evening.
Janet?
Janet.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, Janet?
Hi.
And then we have out in the joining us is Tom and Liz. So Tom
I'm Morgan.
and Liz, I saw your name. Oh, there it is. I had a screen up. And
Hi, Liz Durfee, planning consultant.
All right. Thank you all. So tonight we'll get into a review of the fiscal capacity and capital investment strategies with a new plan.
Okay, you guys ready for that one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me see if I
Show me
can.
the
Mr. Fitzgerald has joined us.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, Mr. Fitzgerald, how are you?
I'm fine now that the verdict's in.
Good.
The somebody's going to have to give me permission to share the screen.
Oh, no.
What, did that one have sound effects that went with it?
Yeah.
I don't think that was me. Can you guys see a map here?
Here we
Yes,
got
we
it.
can. Chapter 14.
Okay, chapter 14. This is closely tied in with the capital improvements program, and I made an effort, of course, to make this consistent with the budget and the capital improvements program, so we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is pretty much been decided by other folks in town, and our job here is to work it into the comprehensive plan, because that's one of the chapters that's required by the state in order to determine that the plan is consistent with Growth Management Act at the end of the day. So that is one of our goals. You're looking at sewer sheds. That's a technical term. I think we've seen parts of this map before. The different colored areas are different neighborhoods, or each of them rely on a sewer pump station to get the wastewater across town to the plant. We're out at Goose Rocks here. And this is one of the more low-lying parts of town. That's why these little squares in the red are closer to sea level than some of the other pump stations. And one reason I'm highlighting the sewer system is of all the capital improvements the town could make, probably the sewer system is one of the more expensive ones, and it's going to be a recurring theme too, because most of the system is 50 years old, so things are reaching the end of their useful life, and the town will be sinking some serious money into this for at least the next 5, 6, 7 years, and starting with a pretty good sized warrant article at the next town meeting. Purpose of this chapter, you guys jump in anytime to comment or question.
Hey, Werner, I just had a quick question. We just had the picture of Goose Rocks. How does the sewer line from there get back? Where does it go? Does it go up Dyke Road, or does it go across the marsh?
No, it goes across the marsh. So it goes, it runs down the west end.
Yep.
And then crosses the river there.
And is Skipper Joe
Yeah, it
Point?
goes right, exactly. Yeah, it goes
they
to
on too?
well, they are. Yep, goes to Marshall's Point.
Marshall's Point. Thank you.
Yep.
And the system's kind of tricky too. If this pump, for example, fails for whatever reason, only the people in green are going to be impacted. But if this one fails down here in the yellow, it means all of Goose Rocks is impacted. Yeah, so it's complex decision-making process, and I have confidence the folks at Public Works know exactly what they're doing. So you guys are going to get where you need to be in the next 10 years.
So Tom, I have a question on this chapter. Is this one meant as this isn't a replacement? If I look at the old chapter or the old comp plan or the current one, this is meant as a replacement for the capital investment strategy chapter, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll see some of the carryover from 2012, in fact.
Right.
So, yeah, it is a replacement, and as I mentioned, we're careful to hit all the check boxes so that your comp plan is certified at the end of the day.
And Tom, these red boxes, the sheds,
Yes.
they're red. That means base flood elevation is what?
Whatever FEMA says it is at the moment, and it varies from one to the next. But the point being is, if you had a 100-year flood, or that's the common name. Technically, it's a flood that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year.
Right.
That the water would come to the bottom of the pump station apparatus. It wouldn't necessarily knock off the electricity or the generator. You need a little higher water for that, but you'd hit the grade elevation at least. So Goose Rocks, because it is the lowest part of town, this is the most vulnerable to sea level rise in terms of your sewer system. You have some other stations that are kind of in challenging positions, but Goose Rocks is the most vulnerable because it is the closest to sea level. Just to say, you really got to pay attention when you're fortifying these pump stations. So 20 years ago when the state first, established this Chapter 208 process to guide municipalities on comprehensive plans, the folks at the state level their primary focus was on, how do you accommodate growth? You want to make sure all the cities and towns are looking at growth and they're not caught by surprise and they're unable to grow because the town didn't prepare. Liz and I are kind of shifting the emphasis a little bit, as you know, we're also preparing for climate change. So the state's looking at still the language is still talking about growth, but we're working climate change into every part of the plan that we think is appropriate and relevant. We've modified somewhat the general purpose of this chapter to include climate change. And then of course, like the CIP itself, part of the art of a CIP is evaluating which ones really need priority, where you should be spending your money soon as opposed to, 5-10 years down the road. And working from the town reports and your current fiscal year 2022 budget, these are your big ticket items, and not everything in the capital improvements program, but these are the ones that are looking at the greatest expenditures. The village fire station, 840. Laurie tells me, I think it's actually close to $1 million now. The prices keep going up. Seawall construction, you just got done doing a major section of seawall along Ocean Ave, but there's 2 more sections further down the road that are probably going to need attention in the next 10 years. The municipal communication system, it's mostly analog now. The town's plan is to go digital, and they'll erect a couple communication towers so that your first responders and your police can communicate throughout town without problem. Right now, you've got some blind spots, which is problematic, particularly if there's an emergency. Like I said, go ahead, Dan.
I was to say, yes, it is. There are a number of places in town where it becomes very difficult to communicate.
Yeah.
With the fire alarm.
Yeah, the police chief told me that sometimes he has trouble communicating with police officers in Dock Square. So
yeah.
That's not a good situation.
Yeah.
Sewer system. You got a couple of 50-year-old components in the wastewater plant, plus 3 pump stations up for a town vote this June. Town meeting's in June, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so you'll be seeing, in the following years, you'll also have big ticket items, mostly pump stations, but this next one is quite a large one. Cape Porpoise Pier is in need of reconstruction. Laurie tells me that the town will be going for some federal assistance for that. With a lot, most of that will be paid for with federal funds. Pier Road is not only in need of rebuilding, but it's very low lying. So the plan the town has is to when they put Pier Road back together again, it's going to be a couple 3 feet higher than it is now, and they'll be a little wider too to accommodate pedestrians. And then the new town offices building has been in the works for several years, and it's in the CIP. I think it's been pushed out 2, 3, 4 years at this point. There's another $3 million right there. Now I have some questions for you all, and that's in the old plan. Public restrooms was an item in this chapter. Is that still a thing in Kennebunkport? Are you guys still pursuing that, or should we strike this?
Well, there's a couple of items, in that public restroom section that I think, can probably be struck that, some of which were carryovers, I think from previous years. And so I'm looking, in that paragraph there, the North Street parking lot piece, that one should get struck. Public restrooms at Goose Rocks Beach is always an ongoing, that's an ongoing discussion, and that, there should remain support in the plan for that.
Okay.
Cape Porpoise Pier, we have public restrooms there, in part at the restaurant that's there. Government Wharf doesn't have the infrastructure. The Cape Porpoise skating rink that's referenced here, that particular piece of property was deeded over to the Heritage Housing Trust. and they're currently building 6 affordable units there. So that should come off of that.
Okay, so we're left with Goose Rocks is the one that's still out there for.
Yeah, I think that's our big, in terms of public, locations, that's the, I think that's the one that, that needs the public support in the comp plan.
Okay, well, we'll leave that in there then. Land Conservation Trust does most of the heavy lifting in this area. When I was scrutinizing the budget and the town report, I didn't see any indication that the town has a fund or a plan to pursue more conservation. Did I miss it, Werner, or what's
No,
going on?
no, you didn't. You didn't miss it. It's something that it's always remained supported in the in the plan. But with the amount of land that the Conservation Trust has in its inventory, they've done a substantial job, and they've really done the heavy lift in terms of land conservation for the town.
Yes, they have. They've done a great job. So even though there's no money lined up, we should leave it in this chapter or take it out.
Well, I think you won't find it in a capital improvement plan. So I think it's something that it's not carved out anywhere in any of the financial plans over the course of the next couple of years. Again, I think it's not bad to have some supportive language here, but to your point, there's no line item that shows up in any future budgets for the purchase of land conservation.
So how about we leave it in, but I'll add a little proviso that says, it's not actually in the CIP, but the town remains interested and ready to move if circumstances warrant.
What we do have, and I just give a little bit of history, within the town's subdivision regs, there's language that allows for developers. We had a situation with a subdivision where developer opted to pay an in lieu of fee for open, as an alternative to open space. And so, I mean, that did yield, I don't recall the exact amount, funds that yielded, but it was in excess of 100,000, that yielded. And so those funds there have been, we've now been able to use some of those funds specifically as it relates to the village parcel for the development of trails. That's where the trail money was pulled from that fund. Right. In support of passive recreation and open space.
Does the fund have a name?
I'm sure it does. I know it does. I will get you the exact name of that fund.
Okay, that's a good fund to have around.
Yep.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
And Werner, back to public restrooms. What's the North Street fire station? Why is that no longer an issue? What happens when people get out of their car after driving 3 hours? What do they do? Yeah,
it's a great question, Paul, and there is a very practical issue with that there. It has a somewhat long and complicated history in that the town, back when they in the early 2000s, when the town proposed a new town hall at the location where 32 North is, one of the pieces that was within that design included a public restroom portion that was there. So there was part of the building design had public restrooms. And so because of the definition in the land use ordinance that qualifies public restrooms as a public hospitality facility, so it's a defined use. It's not a use. It's not a use in village residential, and ultimately the town was taken to court over that. And long story short, now you see what you have at 32 North, which does not have public restrooms in it. So short version is the town tried and got sued.
And So is there a public restroom in Dock Square?
Yes,
Mhm.
there is. Yep. Public
Next-
you're right.
Yeah.
It's in the parking lot, in the Dock Square parking lot.
Okay, so they just have to run there after
That's
they
it.
put.
Car running.
Right, right. It's a difference between,
Automobile.
it's a difference between free parking and paid parking.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll just get back in their car and say, hey, maybe we'll find a place down at Goose Rocks.
Right. But
Last on my list here, bicycle pedestrian network. This one is a carryover from 2012. Where does that stand, Werner, and where do we want to go with this?
well, what you do see within and this was one of the things I was going to ask. I was going to ask about whether or not it needed to show up in in the plan. In previous versions, there's been a little bit more discussion on some of the specifics that are in some of the other capital plans. So, for instance, I don't necessarily know that we need to spell out, what the specifics of, say, for example, the replacement of the, police vehicle fleet is going to be, but, in previous years there was, I'm looking at, what we had in, fiscal year 15 and 16, there were, bicycle, there was parking. Actually, it doesn't look like we had anything in the walking and bicycle plan piece there, but I would have that, I'd spend a little bit more time discussing that with Mike Claus on the, on the road and walks, thought piece there, because there is a fair amount of money that gets set aside for, the reconstruction, maintaining of sidewalks. And so I think that, maybe could be addressed a little bit more.
Well, I will give Mike a call and see what the latest is and where he thinks. And the other thing to keep in mind too is, and we'll be talking about this later this evening. We'll be making a concerted effort to engage the public, and when that happens, maybe we'll be getting some clamoring from the residents for more emphasis on bike tag. We'll find out.
Right. I mean,
Sure.
we need to include it as part of,
Yeah.
I think, in our support of the Maine Climate Council's ideas associated with reducing, transportation. So we've got to address that somewhere.
Yeah.
And this certainly would be a place to put that. And it is, I mean, at least it's a line item on our capital plan that we had in the previous,
Right.
even though there was no money signed in there, at least it's a line item. So I would leave
Right.
it there.
Well, I mean, it showed up in, if you look at the previous plan, it did show up in the sidewalk line.
Right.
And it looks like, I mean, you had some years where, you
50
had,
grand.
yeah, you had 50 grand some years you only had 15 in there, but, it varied everywhere from 15 to 50, over the course of years. So.
But we have spent a lot of effort and continue to, but don't really, it seems like, take credit for, widening roads so that they are more pedestrian and bike friendly. So there's a little bit of a shoulder where there wasn't one before. I think, a lot of effort has gone into figuring out where the rights of ways are, like on Mills Road and on Langsford Road. So
Right.
it seems to be an active focus, which is great. And it is, I saw I guess in the description of the road out to the Cape, out to the pier, there was going to be a little widening for that too. So obviously, we're focusing on that and spending money on that.
Mhm.
Even though it's not a specific line item, like $50,000 for sidewalks, because
Right.
it's being rolled into other projects.
Yeah.
Right. It's probably being rolled right
Yeah.
into the roads project. Right.
Yep, but it definitely should have a, should have a nod, for sure.
Yeah, so we can support it. Okay.
Well, I'll give Mike a call and see what the latest is on that. Conditions and trends. Personnel costs creeping up ever so slightly, as you can see here.
Yep.
Cost of education also on an upward trend, but that's pretty much to be expected, and this is like this pretty much everywhere.
Do we have any data on like that? That's a good comment. Like in versus the state of Maine.
Whether it's growing faster or slower than
Yeah,
the average.
yeah.
I'll see what I can find. Yeah.
yeah, might be interesting just to give it some relativity.
I mean, we got hit hard, didn't we, because of the formula change in RSU 21?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, we
was
picked up some. Yep.
So maybe that was, when did that hit? I don't know if you remember, Werner.
2019
No,
was it?
It was, no, I think that hit before, the bonds were done for all of the improvements
Right,
for the high school. So that's been what? That was
2015 then.
yeah, right.
2015 probably.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That was before this chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a general question. I mean, I'm a fan of seeing data, but I'm just wondering. We've got a couple of pages with the graphs and charts, and I wasn't 100% sure how that spoke specifically to fiscal capacity in the capital plan. I do like seeing trends, as it relates to some of the data. But I'm just wondering what the goal is with some of the data that we have here.
The trends are coming from Chapter 208. That was one of the specific things that state calls for in 208. It's not a goal in itself. The end goal is toward the very end of the chapter, and that is they're seeing what the municipality's capacity for taking on debt is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just a step along the way.
Yeah. So I read it as being more than just what the capital investment plans are. It's right. It's our ongoing operating costs plus what our capital investments are.
Sure.
And do we have the capacity to take on more?
Right. And you guys
To
have
address.
the end of the chapter, the end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But not every town in Maine is, and that's, well, it's kind of like, the state did a one size fits all.
Yeah. Right.
We're going through this exercise to make sure we, end up with a comp plan that is declared to be consistent.
One thing that we could think about adding into like a chart like this one on education is maybe how the tax rate changed over time, also related to how this, how the education budget changed, whether the burden on residents in terms of what they're paying for taxes for the school system changed too, to kind of connect it into the capacity a little bit.
I think that's there on page 9. I'm looking at the.
Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at it right now, but
Yeah, we show the tax rate, the school, and then the school portion and the town portion.
mhm.
And the little blue line looks pretty much the same on both graphs,
Mm-hmm.
as we would expect it would.
Well, since this is a comprehensive plan and it's supposed to last for 10 years, why are we stopping at 22? Do we have any forecasts or anything that we shoot out to the end of the planning period, or should we? To give some glimpse of the future?
We could if you want to. It's much less certain than what's happened in the last 5 years. What you're looking at here is data. When you go beyond 2022, it's speculation to a large extent. Is that someplace that you guys want to go with this?
So what does the state require? They want to know what our capacity is.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, that's that in and of itself is I mean, that's a relatively simple exercise, that's, that was done. Yeah, I think a lot of this data I think a lot of it's good. I just don't necessarily know what we're to do with it, in the guise of fiscal capacity and capital, and capital improvements.
Yeah.
And it may be that that some of this data fits, we fit some of this, the municipal, I'm trying to remember where we put the municipal tax rate and valuation numbers before, but I think we did address some of that data previously elsewhere, but.
Well, what this chart tells me is there's nothing alarming going on here. This is the increase you would expect. It's from the increases in salaries and benefits. Other than that, there's nothing to get excited about here.
Right.
So, that's what it would suggest to me. It's part of the overall picture.
Yeah.
If we were in a different town that had some kind of crisis in paying for schools, this chart would look different, and that would affect your, the outlook at the end.
No,
Right.
but I do think what Jim was saying, made sense, that, if we were looking at this from a, so here are all your, municipal expenditures, and here's what your valuation has been doing, and here's what your mill rate and your taxes have been doing on, for, I don't know, pick a number, for a $500,000, a house that's valued at $500,000, and maybe you do have a projection out for a couple of years based on those trends, because we've got a lot of data for that, that spells out a little bit more of, here's a little bit of a glimpse into the future of what what a future tax impact might be, but in relationship to, here's what your here's how your valuation has grown, here's what your taxable value has looked like, and will potentially look like based on the trends.
Okay. How many years? We can do that, Orna. How many years would you guys like to see we go into the future?
Well, from my perspective, if you're looking at a capital plan, you tell us all these expenses are coming up, some of which are going to be voted on soon, some later. If you read that in the abstract without understanding the relationship to the tax base, it's kind of alarming. Like, am I going to be able to afford my taxes in 3 years? But maybe the answer is, well, look at all the, the valuation, and this is what the impact is actually going to be on you, as opposed to, even though it looks like we're about to, spend, I don't know what the numbers were.
Right.
You know,
Well, right. I mean, a $6 million bond for wastewater in and of itself is is something that,
yeah, that's huge.
it's huge, and that definitely perks your ears up. And yeah, and that's, I think, where I'm going with this is that, it's important to take that information, but you need to take it holistically with seeing where the valuation trends are going as well. I think last year we saw, somewhere in the neighborhood of, a $20 million increase in terms of the valuation. Keeping in mind that usually when we start creating our initial budget projections, in the very beginning, we're always kind of guessing a little bit to some degree. But we generally at the very beginning start off anticipating a $10 million increase, and then we refine those numbers. The further on that we get into the years, we're able to see the trends. Usually, the past couple of years, it's been somewhere between that 15 to 20 million in terms of increase of valuation. So,
and here we're looking at the last 5 years, it's about 100 million over 5 years. So that's right in line with what you were saying, Warren.
Yeah.
And Werner, on the wastewater, that only impacts the people who have sewer?
No, there's a split there, and I'm sorry, I can't quote to you exactly what the split is, but there's a split between the user fees and and coming to the mill rate. So there's a portion, I believe, that goes, that would impact the mill rate, but there's a pretty, I think the larger piece of it goes to the rates.
So,
But I can get you what that number
Yeah,
is.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So everybody's paying for a piece of it. Every property owner, right? And through their taxes is paying for a piece of the sewer plant.
I can
why
get
does that work?
I can get you that. I can get you what that number is.
Hey, Werner, just out of curiosity, I'm on sewer. I'm very happy I'm on sewer, but why do other people have to pay for my sewer?
Because we like
you
it,
know,
Paul.
Subsidize you, Paul.
You don't have enough money.
I'm not going to speculate on the intricacies of splitting out the the bond pieces of that, but
Yeah.
I'll get you that information so that you have that.
But anyway, it points to maybe a differential impact
Yeah.
Right.
for sewer users versus non, as opposed to it
Right.
just being generic.
Right. But you all benefit from clean beaches.
Absolutely. That's probably the reason. Let's hope we
Yeah.
get there someday.
But then on the other side, not everybody pitches in to pay for someone's septic replacement. So,
Right.
right. There's not here's your $250 from the town to help you with your
Yeah, even though
$15,000 project.
that serves the public purpose too, to keep the
Sure.
beaches clean
Yeah.
if you're in the watershed. Yeah, good point.
Returning to education, I'm hearing we want to bring these numbers out into the future.
Well, I think it was more than education. I think it was the whole.
Yeah, I think
Right. I think you need to take the whole thing together. I mean, I think the education piece is interesting, but for the purpose of the chapter, I don't know that it necessarily has to get split out.
Okay. So how many years out do you want to go?
I think the 10 years is probably a good thing to do. And I'm thinking as we're talking about this, maybe we set the example of what we would expect to happen sort of on an annual or biannual basis of updating those projections. So this would be more of an example based on current data, but in 2025, maybe there's another update, and it sort of helps the townspeople understand that the decisions they're making on bonds and approval of the town office and so forth, how it has an overall impact on our
All right. Well, I'll go back to
potential future strategy.
yeah, and we'll get some projections inserted into this chapter.
Yeah.
Whoa. Sorry about that. So here is some of the other expenditures other than the two big ticket items, personnel and education. And you can see the trends. Most of them are pretty flat. Debt service shows a market increase in the last few years, but that's because the town's been playing catch up on capital improvements and they're getting serious about it now. But other than that, there's nothing too remarkable about these trends.
I think
That's the
village
village-
parcel too.
That's
Yeah,
the village.
village parcel. You got it, Paul.
Right.
Yeah, that's not capital improvements. unless you consider the village parcel capital improvements,
Yeah.
which could be.
Okay.
Yeah, we had like no debt before that.
Now you have debt for a while.
So I think this here is very helpful to see,
Yeah.
as opposed to the other, that the other was at 14.4. I would maybe consider, just leaving this one in, and maybe consider removing some of the other graphs.
Werner, you'd like to lose 14.4?
Well, I think this one shows a lot of the same stuff.
Okay. We'll keep this one and we'll retire 14.4.
Which is 14.4. Confused. I'm
Well,
looking.
A moment ago, this is 14.4 here.
Yeah, it's the one we just saw, that one there. Because I think that's all the same.
Well,
data.
Well, this is
same end data. You just don't see the change in years.
That's true. These are this shows the years.
Right.
Yeah, this just gives an example of, just 2022.
Yeah, I think we should leave the other one to show where changes have been and where we've been flat.
Bill,
What about showing?
where maybe
what
we're
about
not
showing
spending
two of
enough.
these?
Yeah, where we're not spending enough
Dan, are you
in
saying
some cases.
14.4?
I'd say keep it. Yes, please. I mean, I see something like that almost being including your projections, right? Dotted lines out to
Oh, yeah.
2030, right? Sort of show where things may
Okay.
increase. I mean, we should expect to see some capital investments
Okay.
in order to deal with some issues,
Right.
right?
What's tricky with the capital piece of it is that, you'll see some, you'll also see some retirement of debt service
Sure.
that'll happen along the way in there.
Yep.
And I want to say that is data that may be shown in the, in some of the budget documents that were recently done.
Yeah.
But,
I just think this visual is very easy to understand.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. We can do it. We can do it. Double globe here.
I mean, instead of 14.4, I just have more trouble following those graph lines. Personally, this is like, oh wow, look how much education is, and you can see it relative to.
Mhm.
So if you showed it for 22 and then showed it for 18 or whatever, so 5 years ago.
16 also. All right.
Dan, what do you think? You like 14.4? I'm
I
saying,
mean, either one's fine if you have if you show the progression across years, and you can skip years and so forth if needed.
yeah,
To
that's
tell
what I was thinking. Skip the years.
Yeah.
And just
you want to tell a story though, right?
Right.
To be able to make sense out of the numbers, right? I mean, you can look at this and nothing really changes, but you're spending 10 million more a year
true.
because everybody got some, but you don't really see that.
well, you could on what was it? That was 14.5 that we had.
Yeah.
If you wanted, like Paul was saying, if you had two side by side, you could include the numbers in terms of the costs, that was associated with it. I mean, this gives us a great, you've got the great visual of understanding the percentage of the pie, but if you had the number that went along with it, whatever, 10 years ago, education cost you however much it was, and 2022 education now costs you this.
Okay. We
Right.
can.
We have that.
number
We have that
cost.
14.1, which shows 2021 and 22 with exactly that. So maybe there's a way not to, forget 2021, but show 5 years ago.
Which graph are you on now, Paul?
I'm looking at 14.1.
Right.
Oh, 14.1, yeah.
Yeah.
The one that's right next to that in the
Right.
in
Next
the
to the
chapter
pie
itself.
chart.
Yeah, those two going together are a
Yeah,
little bit
or-
better story.
maybe one slide with 5 years ago with the chart and then the table, you know, the pie.
All right, well, I will incorporate all these suggestions and get another version of this out for you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so that's 14.5. Next up, property tax revenue. This line looks very much like the tax base. They both been trending up pretty a healthy clip there. And here's where you've been collecting revenue from sources other than property taxes. This is, as we'll see in a moment, these are small numbers compared to property taxes. So this chart isn't that important. But
Hey,
this-
Werner,
Yeah.
on the prior chart with the property tax increase, yeah, that one. Can we show the mill rate change in that time? Is it the same and it's just as a result of more property on the tax roll, or is it a result of the mill rate, you know,
Yeah.
going up 2018, 19, 20, 21?
Yeah, it's a good question. What really, to get a better picture, you kind of have to throw in 3 lines there. You know, you have to show the valuation. You'd want to show the tax rate, you know, as well as, you know, what the other one was, you know, with your expenditure, you know, to get kind of the you know, the picture of what's going on.
Which is shown later on in
Yeah.
looking down a couple pages.
All right, well, I will try to combine this one with that previous one. Now, it's a little tricky. Sometimes it works out okay and you can really see a correlation. Other times,
Yep.
because the data is so disparate, it doesn't come out like you might hope. But I'll play with it, see what it do.
Like showing, at least for my way of thinking, showing the revenue sources from other than property taxes on the same slide as the property taxes. You know, I'd rather see the mill rate and some other information than the other revenue. Which,
Okay, so you're not impressed with this one here.
no, I'm impressed by it, but
Right.
I'm left wondering, and I won't hold the thought for 4 slides or 4 pages to see what the tax rate is. You know, it raises the question when I see this lovely chart from 17 million to 20 million. Well, how did that happen? Is what I ask.
Yeah.
And I can't get the answer there.
Yeah, the other thing too, I don't necessarily know, even with this one, like what do I, you know, what's my takeaway if I don't know anything about this? Is this good? Is this bad?
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, if you put it in the context of the property tax revenues, this is rather insignificant.
Right, and maybe that is, you know, and I think that's what we see, you know, and because that's the thing, you show that elsewhere whenever we get into estimated revenues,
If you,
you know, so, you know, maybe this one isn't, you know,
Well,
I don't know if it's necessary or not, but that's where I think you see that exact picture, you know, like what you said, you know, is how much is this actually, you know, how much do these miscellaneous revenues here really contribute to the overall, you know, the overall
it's like 15%.
income, you know, and it's a relatively small, you know, sliver that you see there,
yeah,
Well,
which is what we see right on
right.
on 14.8.
In total, it's like 15%, right? You got about 3.5 million coming in there versus
Yeah.
20. So
let's
Yeah.
jump into 14A here.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's a much better.
Yeah,
I agree with that. That's a much better picture for that.
yeah, because if we put all of this on the same line chart,
Right. It blows it out.
the scale of
Right.
these so strange
Yeah.
that all this stuff would look flat. It look
Right.
looks
Right,
like
right.
the bottom of the chart. You know?
Yeah, and that's, I think the pie
He's
Yeah.
good for that one.
All right.
is a good chart for that one.
Why don't we lose 14.7? because you guys like the pie much better.
Sometimes with those pies, you can actually put in the dollar figure too, along with the percentage, depending on how those, I've been able to do that before. And
Yeah, we could do that. You want to see dollar figures in this one?
yeah, for 2022, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. All right. So, okay, this one's a winner. Tax rate, we saw that a moment ago. We're gonna see what we can do with comparing that with the revenues. And,
What is tricky with that one is looking at the mill rate, and maybe there wants to be some additional info on that, because we had it in the current plan where you saw this massive change in the mill rate, and it was because of the revaluation that happened, and so, but we're past that trend, we're past that trend line to where you don't see it, but it really gave a visual as to, when you try to explain to somebody what happens to a mill rate after a reval occurs, and then you show that and you say, oh gosh, all right, now I see what happens with it. It changes dramatically.
Yeah.
We just don't have we don't have the benefit of that, data yet.
When is the next reval coming up?
So, well, we started a market adjustment process, last year. Last year. And then we put it on a hold, just with COVID, that was one of those projects alongside with the comp plan that got put on hold. We're picking it back up again, to do some, to do some adjustments.
Okay.
So it's not a full, it's not a full blown reval, but it's it's a market adjustment piece. It'd be interesting to see where things land with construction values. I suspect the data that we'll have for construction values will be past published data, and not the current screaming bubble that we're seeing right now. But I suspect that they'll use past published data for those costs.
Yeah.
Everything's a bubble right now.
A few slides further in here, we'll get a comparison of what your current valuation would look like if it was 100%. So that's a big difference, as you'll see in a moment.
Yeah.
You know what strikes me about this chart here? Look how flat 2 out of the 3 categories are. That's remarkable over a 5-year span.
Yeah. Not surprising.
But
A little surprising that county hasn't asked for more money, but
yeah, typically the counties can't go 5 years without doing something. But the town one, the line in the middle here, the municipal expenditures, that's, the selectmen and everybody else just holding the thing steady. There's obviously an effort to keep it flat. This is not a natural phenomenon. And here's the valuation. We saw this chart a few moments ago. Over the last 5 years, we've added all these zeros. I want to make sure I say this right. 100 million over a 5-year period.
which helps keep that number flat. The previous one, right?
Yeah. So
Because you're increasing your revenues without making any change to your mill rate.
right. Kennebunkport is a hot market. Components of the tax rate. Here's a pie chart where we do have both the dollar amount and the percentage.
Yep.
And of course, this is what the state wants to see. Wants to make sure you guys aren't going over a financial cliff. They said don't borrow more than 15%, and you guys are at 0.5%. Now the basis for that isn't your 76% valuation, but what the town would be if it was at 100%. And currently, if it's just a mathematical calculation to translate your current valuation into 100%, you'd be looking at a tax base of $2.6 billion, which is, 600 million more than where you are now.
Yeah, I'm I'm constantly just blown away that that number can get that high.
Wow.
I mean, that
A good thing to have if your sewer system's 50 years old and you have to fix it,
oh no, yeah, 100%, but it's, I think it's, that certainly is, I mean, it's a staggering number of what it could be for a community. I think is my reaction that, that a community could get itself into trouble, pretty quickly. And, with that, with that type of a debt limit. But
so there's your chapter 14. Liz and I will do the changes that you guys have proposed tonight, and we'll get back to you with a revised version. We have another item on the agenda tonight, and that's public outreach.
Yep. Before we finish on this piece, I've sent the chapter out just because there's the potential for some additional comment, from from some of the other departments. So we just haven't had a chance to come back with formal comments yet on it, from a staff perspective on this one. So I suspect we'll have some additional comments to pass along to you all.
Okay. Yeah, I guess one of the other questions I was going to ask, I mean, we have some numbers in here that I haven't at least seen in the public space previously, such as the municipality and the fire department costs. Are those things that are going to be presented prior to this going out to?
About back to the beginning here, Dan?
Well,
Yeah, those numbers you had there, but they're also within the individual pieces of the chapter.
Yeah, my source for most of these are your current budget, your fiscal year 2022, which
Okay.
also incorporates the CIP into it.
Okay. So that might just be my ignorance.
Oh, no. What's
I
happening is the CIP will say 840 for the fire station, and then, Laurie's working on the current budget, and the price has already gone higher.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a matter of
Yeah.
one document not keeping up with the other one.
And the budget board has just met with the Board of Selectmen, and I think they basically agreed on, what will go to the voters. So some of these numbers I recognize from that.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just don't want us introducing those numbers in our chapter. I want them being based on, stuff that's already been taking place in the town.
Well, we'll have to
Budgets,
wait till
communication.
June and see what happens.
Yeah.
Then this is just a draft at this point.
That's right. I mean, there could be, some refinement in those numbers, and I think it's important to remember too. Really, the purpose of what we want to see with a chapter like this is to provide that good comp plan support for these types of improvements and projects, so that when it comes time for grant funding, that we can point to these to show in those applications that
Right.
that there's community support for these projects.
Right.
Yeah, I do think there should maybe also be some language that that talks a little bit more about the town's use of the state revolving loan fund, and some of those other tools that have been used. But
Yeah, I didn't know what that was when I read that.
yeah.
Werner, where's some?
Tom,
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, going back toward the beginning, I assume that if and when the census numbers come out, we'll revise the paragraph on population growth?
Absolutely. I'm trying to remember when the census usually releases those numbers.
Well, it's overdue, and there's a big fight going on because they've had to delay it because the
Yeah.
count got all messed up because of COVID and other
Yeah.
reasons.
Okay.
So I think it's coming out like the summer, maybe I heard. It's overdue right now, but it's messing up everybody's redistricting plans, which are overdue.
Mhm.
But I think by the summer or early fall, the number is supposed to come out, or the number is supposed to be revised.
That's good. Liz and I will be right on top of it.
The other thing that struck me, I mean, I think you had a paragraph, the third paragraph in population growth. During the century's second decade, a number of year-round homes were converted to short-term rentals. This trend tends to inhibit growth in the year-round population. But I'm not sure that's really going to be borne out. Like anecdotally, if you take Goose Rocks, which has a nice population size, there are far more year-round residents here. I talked to someone who's been here and is a realtor and who knows. You know, when she raised her children here 30 years ago, basically after Columbus Day, there wasn't anybody at Goose Rocks, and there was no businesses in Dock Square that were supported. Yet we have this baby boom going on, and everybody is, you know, selling their houses in Massachusetts and moving here full-time or 6 months or 8 months. There are far more lights on here, you know, certainly since COVID, but that's a strange phenomenon in itself. So on balance, I don't really know that, you know, it could be that we'll have more year round. They may be in different places in town. But certainly we've added a lot of population at the beach. And there are far fewer homes being rented than there were 20 or 30 years ago. As people have gotten money and they've renovated little cottages, they don't rent anymore. So it's a lot of things going on all at once. And I'm not sure year-round population, you know, the drop that occurred, you know, took place before there was the internet or there was any Airbnb. So, you know, it's a complex thing that's going on. So I'm just concerned that doesn't really reflect what's happening. There's
And I think some of this.
There are certainly rentals elsewhere in town that didn't exist 20 years ago because of the popularity of the town. I think Tim Harrington gets a lot of credit for putting us on the map, and the Bush is putting us on the map. And so, you know, you couldn't rent anything off the beach 25 years ago. Nobody did, but now people do. But there are less rentals here, I think, than there were 30 years ago when I first started renting.
Yeah, and I think some of that, you know, really belongs, you know, that discussion, those pieces there belong more in the demographics chapter.
Right.
Piece of it, as opposed to fiscal capacity, because I don't think we're drawing any conclusion from a fiscal capacity or capital improvement perspective on short-term rentals or what, you know, or the demographic. You know, I'm not, you know, we're not drawing those conclusions here. This is, you know, and, you know, this chapter is really, you know, here's your capacity, you know, here's where, you know, here's the value. You know, I almost think of this as you're looking at your investment per se,
Yeah.
right? You know, like this is your, you're giving some information to hear about your 401k and how it's growing and what your living expenses are going to be, those types of things.
Yeah, so I guess, Werner, I think I would just strike it then from here and put it in the demographic.
No, yeah, I would agree with that. I don't
Mhm.
know that it's relevant for.
Okay, we can do that.
I would just add that I think
Oh.
we have information on the demographics, obviously not the 2020 decennial data yet. What we have mostly in the demographics chapter is the American Community Survey 5-year estimates.
Right.
There already are more updated data available because that chapter was written a year ago. And we could have a conversation about, updating all of that again, but it would essentially involve quite a bit of rewriting and analysis to revise the American Community Survey data to be the latest 5-year estimate. But certainly if we get the census data back, then that would be great to include.
Yeah, no, I don't think you want to get into that. I mean, because you run the risk of always having, at some point you've got to draw the line in terms of what data you use. Or else,
Keep
your
going
wheels
forever.
Yeah, your wheels are always going to keep spinning with new data.
But the 10-year census data, if that does come out, that would definitely be good to include. And there's not as much reliance on that data in the demographics chapter, just because it's not quite as accurate a picture of today because it's already 10 years old. So
I would argue that from a fiscal capacity standpoint, though, the population size and its growth or decline would be relevant. Not so much the number and so forth, but if you had a population that's growing 10%, you might be worried about your school system if you'd been seeing that, right? So maybe you have to plan for the school system, that kind of thing. If it's dropping 10%, those kind of things that could impact decisions you're going to make about your capital.
No, that's a good point, and that's not something that, I mean, you see the increase in school budget and, I guess to some degree, if you were trying to draw a conclusion, you would say the increase in budget is due to the increase in, the number of kids that you have in the system. But I don't know that that's factual.
No, actually, I think we declined.
Right,
Yeah.
we did. We
Works the
declined.
other way around.
And we still spent more money. So,
Right.
So I think it's important to have it. I don't know if we need the exact numbers other than having that discussion piece in here. And if the numbers help the discussion, great. You get into, okay, we got the numbers here, we got the numbers in this other chapter, do they match and that kind of stuff. But I think it's important to have a discussion about population and our view of whether we feel it's going to grow and therefore we should adjust for it or it's going to stay fairly stable. Which is probably likely.
Okay.
Since it's so hard to get into this town.
Sounds like Dan's getting the last word on this one.
That's just my idea.
So you guys, the rest of you, okay if we leave it in then?
Well, my comment was only on, I think the population growth numbers are important. My question was the relevance of the short-term rentals, which I didn't think.
Okay.
The conclusion, I didn't see the support for the conclusion, and I'm not sure that it will turn out to be true when the census comes out.
Okay, well, we can strike that. Ultimately, we could include a sentence on the seasonal conversions. It's also accounting for some of the population growth, particularly during the pandemic. I mean, I'm going by what you were just telling us, Paul, in terms of what you've been seeing down at the beach.
Yeah, I mean, it's so who knows what it'll end up being. That's
all right. Well, let's not go out on a limb. I'll strike that paragraph for now.
Of course, if the state would allow us to charge a sales tax, it wouldn't be relevant.
Yeah.
Right, and that's, I think, is, and maybe that's something, I don't know that you want to get into that, but that's, that is an interesting note that, that the state does limit, municipalities in terms of their income generation, to certain things, and there are some elements that they don't, allow communities to, to have a, additional tax on. Not that you would want it, but it's,
Right.
like it's a, from what I understand, it's a common conversation at the state level, that always, that always gets shot down. But
A lot of places I travel to, or when I was traveling, there was about 5 or 6 different taxes on the hotel bill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Local, city, state.
yeah, well, the discussion always winds up being is that, that the state never seems to return, the amount that they should be returning back to the towns, that gets collected on a lodging tax. And yet, communities, spend a fair amount of their municipal budget, in just, in dealing with that, in dealing with that industry. And, but
Yep.
we won't solve that discussion tonight.
No. Sorry, I brought it up.
Well, the other item we have on tonight's agenda is public outreach. Are you guys ready for a conversation on that?
Sure.
And Liz, you've done most of the work on this. Do you wanna pick it up and run with it?
Sure. Could I have the ability to share my screen? Thank you. Tom, can you stop sharing?
Oh, okay. Can't
Thanks.
do both at once, huh?
Yeah. Perfect. All
Uh-oh,
right.
The timing is just
really? Hope you're almost done, Mom.
What was the about?
I hope you're almost finished with that, Mom, whatever you're doing.
Oh, you can hear that?
Oh, sure.
I thought headphones would help.
No, that's
Um,
okay. No worry. No worries.
It's a lot louder over here.
Yeah.
She's it's bedtime. She's had some
Mhm.
stomach issues, so
Yeah, that's
poor
a
little
bummer.
thing. So Tom and I have spent some time thinking about our summer public outreach event and wanted to get some input on a couple different options for the first of the sort of 2 larger, I would say, public input events that we had initially included in our proposal. This is a snapshot from the proposal of the different public outreach options that we had talked about, or components. We have not followed this to a T, but you can see some of the main events we did end up leaving in the scope of work. Event tabling, we did the Climate 101. Groundwater Rising is the presentation that we will be inviting Dr. Jay Knott to attend. And I will, forgetting the dates off the top of my head, but either Tom or I will pull those up before the end of our discussion tonight to identify the dates that Jane is available. Tonight we wanted to focus on a discussion about what to do about our proposed SWOT workshop. And this is item F here. SWOT is the Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats workshop, sort of a creative brainstorming session that Tom and I have used in the past to engage small groups in a discussion about a range of different topics. But given the constraints of COVID, we wanted to present some information about a couple different approaches that we've thought about to kind of work around COVID. So first, the general purpose of this particular public input session is sort of threefold. One, to engage the community in land use planning and inform them about the comprehensive plan. To solicit input from community members on a variety of issues, identify some concerns and problems and opportunities, and to gather information to inform the development of goals and strategies, and also make sure we're not missing any key items in the chapters themselves that are of particular importance to residents. So the first option, I'm going to talk about two options and just sort of briefly introduce them and then show what we think are some of the similarities and differences, primarily in the structure. We would hope to gain generally the same information from either option. Option A would be to sort of follow the general plan that we had for conducting a large public workshop and breaking it into a few different sessions of small group discussions. At the beginning, I've just included a few items that would likely fall in the agenda of this workshop. So we would take some time to introduce the comprehensive plan and the process. We'd provide some background information, including some fact sheets and information to help sort of bring people up to speed on what some of the existing trends and conditions are in a set of different planning topic areas. And then we would have residents or community members participate in a series of 3 different small group sessions. And this would give folks the opportunity to choose a topic that they're most interested in. We may have 5 or 6 topics available, gather at a table together, discuss a set of prompts and questions that we have established ahead of time around that specific topic. And then, spend 20 to 30 minutes on a topic and then rotate to a different topic and have the opportunity to sort of have a discussion on a different topic of their choice with another set of community members. And then at the end, we come together and report out on some findings that are, most interesting, surprising, and ask residents to share. We have found that this exercise is really great for getting people to really dive in to particular issues. We supply maps and, enough background information that folks feel comfortable with responding to and providing input on the questions and sort of the guidance that we put together in advance. So that's option A. Option B, and I guess I should mention a couple details on, I'll mention them after. Option B would be to hold a series of maybe 5 different virtual focus group discussions. These would be Zoom meetings, and we would focus on a different topic every meeting, probably maybe an hour and a half to 2 hour meeting. And we would choose the same set of topics. And when I say topics, I mean generally a chapter. We would choose likely 5 chapters that we want to really focus in on. And I think we would choose those chapters based on where we think there will be most public input, where we have the most questions, and where some of the more controversial topics may lie. So for instance, we've talked a lot about housing. We've spent some time talking about energy, transportation, and then we would include climate change in all topics, because that's sort of a constant piece throughout the plan. So some of the details, and sort of these are pretty general details that we wanted to lay out just to kind of compare both of these options. The SWOT workshop, this would be something that we would hold outdoors. probably be about 3 hours, either on an early evening or a Saturday. It would involve the interactive small group discussions. Each attendee would participate in discussions on 3 topics. We'll have note takers, self-designated note takers for each table. We typically generate quite a bit of written information during these types of workshops. We would need to figure out a location. It's likely that even with the vaccines becoming more available, we wouldn't hold a large event inside in the summer. So we would need to figure out a location. We would likely need things like a tent, tables, chairs, and a microphone. We'd bring printed material instead of electronic material. If we were to hold the virtual focus groups instead of the SWOT workshop, we would do this primarily if we're not feeling comfortable with holding a large event outside, or the logistics of getting a tent and a setup outside are just not feasible. So the virtual focus groups would maybe be one focus group meeting per week, 5 different events, maybe spread out over a month or a month and a half or so. We could include evenings and a Saturday. We'd primarily cover 1 topic per meeting. We'd hold these on Zoom. We'd provide digital material. We'd have some PowerPoints together. And we'd likely add a focus group for staff, particularly if we hold the meetings in the evening, just to make sure that we're really capturing input from staff. And this is probably something that we could do if we hold the SWOT workshop as well, just to make sure that we provide time during business hours for staff to really weigh in on all topics in the comp plan. And community members would be able to attend 1 or all 5 sessions, or any number of in between. So some of the commonalities, I would say, between these 2 different structures would be providing information about the comprehensive plan, some information about trends, conditions, some of the issues that sort of rose to the top in terms of items that we have identified as things that we want more public input on, some of the more controversial issues, some of the more interesting topics. We develop a series of prompts and questions under each overarching topic. And then we would include climate change considerations with all the topics. Does anyone have any questions before I move forward on that?
From a timing standpoint, when would we need to have these sort of completed by in order for you guys to stay on schedule?
Well, we had the SWOT scheduled for July, I believe.
Okay.
And if we are planning on holding another larger public engagement event to refine our goals and strategies, or to look at some conceptual future zoning or future growth rate mapping, depending on the growth planning committee's interests in those pieces. We would just need to build in some time for us to digest the material from the first session, incorporate it, put together strategies, and get ready for a second session. I can pull up the schedule in a second. So I'm not remembering when we had the second input session planned for, but we were planning on July, I believe, for this SWOT exercise. So I think we would still want to target that time frame for either of these 2 options. We could certainly probably bump up focus groups and start a little bit earlier, or even the SWOT workshop, as long as we make that decision with enough time, advance notice to get ready for it and advertise.
Yeah, I was more concerned about the SWAT one, because as you know, even with the vaccines, et cetera, I think it's still going to be a while before we'll be able to. I mean, maybe Werner, you can weigh in on what the thinking is in the town, but just based on discussions I've had in the company I work for
What's
before
the
large events.
Yeah.
what's the CDC on outdoor this summer so far? Numbers for weddings and things? I think that's come out, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
have to double check that.
I want to say that the numbers right now for gatherings are still set at 100, but
Right. That's what I
yeah.
that sounds about right.
And I will say, like, I think it would be incredible if we got 100 people.
Yeah.
But even with well advertised events, I don't think that we've seen numbers like that. So, I mean, I think we probably, we could, just work along that thought process that we wouldn't exceed that 100, just based on past, and what we've had for past attendance.
But what I'm thinking is if you have, say only 30 people show up, 40 people show up, but you break them into groups of 6 to 10, they still need a fair amount of space, even when you're outside, right? You can't sit next to each other and on a picnic table and do this. So you really need to show that space, because not everyone you don't want to just invite people who've been vaccinated, because even though vaccinated people, they still don't know whether or not they can spread it to others, even though they don't get sick. Because you want to leave it open to everybody, and you don't want to have people be fearful of showing up because they have underlying health conditions and they can't risk it. So just have a concern that we're not going to be able to get enough participation.
Mm-hmm. And we're just to be clear, we're not looking for a decision tonight.
Yeah, okay.
This is something to think about, and it's also something we could include in one of the mini surveys just to see, just to poll folks, like, theoretically, would you attend an in-person event if it was outside in July, assuming CDC guidelines may have shifted a little bit, and we could plan for a best case scenario of more than 100 people attending. We just want to start having the conversation just so we can think about which direction we might go. A lot of the information that Tom and I will develop for either event would be pretty similar, but for scheduling purposes and advertising, we want to make sure to give folks a decent amount of advance notice too.
Well, and I think that is close enough as well to when we'd be dealing with town meeting. So I think for consistency's sake, whatever winds up being the call for town meeting, we should probably be the same call for this.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So one of the questions.
If you're going outside.
Yeah, and I think that we would plan on outside. And that one of the questions that Tom and I had was if we are going to hold a workshop outside, we would need a tent and potentially renting tables and chairs, and that's not cheap. And so we're wondering if any of you are aware of rental companies in Kennebunkport that might be interested in donating a tent. I know the likelihood of having an available tent on a Saturday in COVID times is probably pretty slim, but it's definitely not something that we have, included in our budget for a tent rental. So that's a sort of a big logistical consideration, but there could be a company out there or a potential sponsor that may be interested in supporting land use planning.
One possibility might be to work with the trust, assuming there are weddings back on this summer. They often have tents every weekend. And if we're back to 100 people, I suspect the weddings I've heard of weddings happening. So maybe you could do, with the cooperation of the trust and the wedding people, make sure the tent is up by a Thursday and do it on a Thursday night, and have it outdoors at the trust. Those tents are big, and there's plenty of parking. So that would be one possibility. Another thought is to do one, do like a SWAT outdoors. I do think there'd be a lot of people who would like to actually see other people, particularly if they're vaccinated. So to do something like that, and then do a parallel event, do the same event for, online, a virtual one, and do it with Zoom rooms, so that if you want to go to the one on whatever, you select that room. I've never done this, but I understand it's done all the time. So you can split into 5 groups and then come back and do it the same way. I don't think you could do them a hybrid all at the same time because of technology and Wi-Fi and those kinds of challenges.
Right.
But
We're familiar with those. The Zoom calls them breakout rooms.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would only be 2 events, and if you missed, it would be the same content, and then you just would merge the feedback and,
One thing the Kennebunkport Rec does very successfully, that I thought, was they have drive-ins where you actually just drive your car in and park, and then you have a smaller stage that you could put whatever you need up for displaying things and whatever, and maybe some tables scattered around for people to gather at, where you don't need a tent. They have their cars there if anything happens, and it's probably a lot less expensive that way.
Now,
So do people stay in their cars during the event?
Mhm.
Sure, they can stay in their cars.
how do you communicate with everybody?
yeah, you can't talk to
Hey
it.
guys,
Yeah.
We have phones. Call me.
got an idea.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think folks, they got out and wandered around a little bit, at that point. But yeah, I was thinking similarly that, we've got the ball field there next to Consolidated.
Right.
That certainly is a potential location to be able to host this. Going off of the rec, the rec thought, they just, we just had the kids over there the other day for where they did an Easter egg hunt, and they just, they did people in shifts,
Mhm.
and maybe that's, because, you may find some people are more interested in one topic, but not necessarily in all topics, for example, you could spread out the topics, based on shifts, I don't know, but that seemed to work. That seemed to work relatively well. They broke, for the Easter egg, hunt that they did, they just broke them up by age group. Made for a long day, but it was another way to run, a potentially larger number of people through, the same experience.
Not only that, but they have bathrooms there, which you have to think about too if you're going to have an outdoor event. So,
yeah, power bathrooms and parking.
Hey, Werner, do you know when they plan to make a decision on how the meeting will be held in June?
I don't. I have that as a note here to
Okay.
to find out what town meeting is going to look like.
Werner, do you know what options they're looking at for town meeting?
No, I don't at this point. I mean, typically, that we've held them at, like consolidated, and, last year, what did we have? We had everything on a, I mean, it went, gosh, ridiculously quick. We had a pretty small group, that was there. So,
But
but
you limited to 30 people, didn't you, or something?
I believe there was a limit at that point. Yeah.
Yes, basically
that was
could
in
go.
place.
I know some towns have responded to the COVID challenges by actually purchasing a large tent. I don't know if that's something Kennebunkport has considered or would consider, but it would serve the purpose that you could hold every municipal meeting outside rather than Zoom. People might be getting tired of Zoom, but just thought I'd throw that out there, just in case the town might want to.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I mean, certainly what I've heard is that, I mean, well, we knew last year tents went into high demand. Mostly, good many restaurants, took those up, and folks started planning and scheduling, their tent rentals. I mean, we were having conversation with folks, back in, February, about events and tent rentals. So I think that, it's not to say that there isn't, some opportunity out there, but
Mhm.
I have to say, I like Paul's idea, is that if, a conversation with the trust, maybe
Right.
piggybacking on, on somebody's, on somebody's wedding, that already has a tent and everything set up. I think that's a great idea. Especially if there's, a willing party that'll let us jump in there.
Mhm.
But
The other thought,
Well-
another thought is like, what time are those like the hurricane tents?
Yes.
And Allison's tents? If you did a 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, are those restaurants open then? You've given them the space to use on municipal property, so maybe they would let us use those tents.
yeah, I mean, this year we don't have, so Allison's isn't setting up this, for this summer. We only have Hurricane that's setting up. Now that some of the seating numbers have changed again, but
I
yeah,
saw
no,
that go up.
yeah, but no, it's a good point. I mean, I know hurricanes. Well, the tricky thing is that you've got your all the furniture and everything is all set up in those, and the only time that you're really not, that it's not occupied, would be in the morning. You could
Right.
do if you did a morning, if you did some type of a morning event.
Mhm.
But it's an option. I mean, to have that conversation with hurricanes, but logistically, I think that is a little bit tough because they've got a pretty good, they've got a pretty nice setup in there. Unless they let us use all their tables and chairs. So
Well, why don't we get in touch with Hurricanes and the trust and see if we can get any leads on potential options, unless a committee member has a good connection with either of those entities. And if not,
No,
Tom and I
no.
can reach out.
yeah, if you want to, Liz, if you just want to shoot me an email with that I can get you the contact info for both,
Okay.
and that way we're all on the same,
Mhm.
we're all on the same page with that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if we include you in when we reach out.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, we can
So-
check with the other committee members too. I mean, Mike and Jim, I don't believe are on today, so
Yeah.
maybe they have contacts.
Yeah, that would be great. We don't have to pick a specific deadline for choosing an option, but I think that we would want, at least a month in advance to really, I mean, if we're doing a tent outside option, we will need to nail that down relatively quickly. but we can sort of keep it flexible for the time being while we look into options for tents and double check the CDC guidelines. And I know things are starting to become more relaxed in New Hampshire, and they may be in Maine also. We can consider adding a question to our next mini survey on interest in participating in person, so that we could get some feedback on that. Because if no one feels comfortable, then we certainly want to hold an event. And then the other thing to start thinking about is, if we are going to choose maybe five different chapters to sort of focus on what those planning topics might be. So whether I think housing, I think housing is something we've definitely talked about a lot. We've talked about some transportation issues related to traffic concerns and bike ped access, trails, and connectivity. We've talked about recreation, I think, has been another area that, and water access. Natural resources. We can really pick whatever topics you think are most pertinent, and Tom and I are in the process of going back through the chapters and pulling out some of our notes from discussions on the questions that came up, and things that we wanted to shoot out to the committee for broader input.
Right.
And then other next steps.
I have a quick question, Liz. Is a tent considered an indoor environment since it's got four walls and a roof?
That's a good question.
It's 50 indoors and 100 outdoors, but I think outdoors means in plein air. I don't think it means enclosed.
Yeah.
Right. It's an important, important distinction, Janet. Definitely, whenever we were dealing with, the COVID guidelines last summer, if you had the walls down, it was indoor.
Mm-hmm.
CDC definitely wanted to see, those walls up.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think if we had planned for a July event, we would probably want the walls up anyways. There could be a risk of rain, but I think it would be pretty hot inside.
Yeah, and I think that's really, in terms of the grand scheme of needing a tent to begin with, that's really what we're dealing with here, is the possibility of rain.
Yeah.
And the hot sun. I hadn't even considered the walls down, because one of the great things about the tent is you can't beat the ventilation.
Right.
Yeah.
So just a little bit more food for thought. We'll have to put in some time into advertising once we set the date, and potentially even beforehand, identify our key topics and a set of questions and prompts, and develop the agenda and meeting material, whether it's print or virtual, and then advertise the event. So those are kind of the big picture, overarching next steps for that outreach. And then really quickly, the dates that Dr. Jane Knott is available for presenting are May 18th or June 1st. She is available to come and do the Groundwater Rising outreach event.
And those are both nice. One is the third Tuesday of the month, the other is the first. So we'd be on a regular growth planning committee schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So we're wondering if committee members have a preference.
So that would be done virtually, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
What were the dates?
So-
The dates are May 18th or June 1st.
Guess I would target June 1. Gives us a month and so to, advertise.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan, because this is a really compelling document.
Sure.
Compelling subject, and
Yeah.
I think we should get as many people as we can to check it out. It's pretty interesting.
Are you gonna videotape it as well, so people can watch it if they miss it? Or record, I should say videotape, record.
Yeah,
I mean, record at our meeting. I guess if they record it as part of our meeting, so that's
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Never mind. Stupid question, Dan.
No.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd say, what do the other members think? 6-1, reasonable?
Fine with me. Sounds
Yep.
like a good date.
and you
So
know, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been much work done in Maine on this topic, so that'll kind of put you guys on the map.
Good deal. So it sounds to me then for this discussion on whether we do virtual or SWAT, we really need to come to a conclusion maybe by 5/18, right? Is that what you guys are looking for?
For your June
Yeah.
1.
No, for what we're doing on
Oh,
SWAT.
for that.
Otherwise, we're looking at,
Oh,
I mean,
and
June
SWAT.
1 will be taken up by this. We could certainly add a discussion on, but we do have to, I don't,
I think mid-May is a good time to target
Right.
to figure to
Yeah.
make a
Okay.
call on what format maybe.
Mhm.
We're meeting again in 2 weeks. We can pick up this discussion where we left off.
sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Very good. Any other questions on the public outreach from the members?
All set.
Okay, very good. Thank you for both those topics. Good discussion. Agenda number 4 is review of minutes from April 6th. So sorry, I was sort of late getting those out, but I did send them out yesterday. If you had a chance to review them, fine. If we want to table that to the next meeting, that's fine as well.
I didn't look at them yet, so let's do them.
Okay,
next
let's table them
Yeah.
next time. Very good.
You didn't even have to go to the meeting last time. Looks like they're so comprehensive.
Well,
Unbelievable.
they're just long.
Now, Jim, don't give people ideas. We don't.
Yeah.
want you guys to show up at these meetings.
Okay, then is next steps. So next steps we just sort of just talked about, I think. Is there anything else we need to add to next steps?
No, we just wanted to plant some seeds tonight, so you guys have 2
Okay.
weeks to think about this outreach.
Werner, anything on your part we need to do?
No, I think I'm good at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so next meeting will be May, what?
May 4th.
May 4th, thank you. So May 4th. All right, hearing there's no other topics, Jim, I'll take the,
I don't hear any other topics being requested, so therefore I'll ask for an adjournment.
all right. I hear a second.
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
All right, thank you all. Have a good
Thanks.
night.
Night,
Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right. Good night.
Take care.